All right, everyone. We had some technical difficulties, so we're going to set up a new live, and I'm going to post it on the Facebook page, and we're going to take it from there. So bear with me. Okay, we are back. I just posted on Facebook for our Facebook group. There we go. So just going to let everyone know we are here. All right. So, sorry about the technical difficulties, everyone. It's the YouTube Live syndrome, but it's all good. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to give people an opportunity who've been following Taksim, who've been keeping track of the different things we're doing, just to give you an opportunity to hear from us. We might start doing this on a more regular basis, just to provide kind of like a town hall meeting or a community update, to get people updated on what we're working on, share some of our excitement about the different things that, different projects that we have in the pipeline, maybe share a little bit about our experience of working with Taksim and what we've done, and kind of just, build that good energy. We've gotten such a strong response. All of our work has been warmly welcomed by so many people across the world, so we're super grateful and thankful for that. My partner and I, Aram Hovagimian, we started this about 18 months ago. It started as a combination lesson idea with sounds. I play the oud, Aram plays the keyboard. So we kind of put our heads together and we said, you know what, we should start doing something that would help modernize and organize Middle Eastern music. So we started Taksim, I believe it was the very end of 2018, beginning of 2019, and it's kind of really taken off from there, which is exciting. We've been working really hard on it. As I was saying, the response from everyone has been so supportive, so interested. Every time we post something, we get a great number of people leaving their comments and remarks and supportive suggestions and recommendations and all that kind of good stuff. So that's been really encouraging. And we continue to see it grow and blossom, which has been really inspiring for us as musicians and people who are interested in Middle Eastern music and preserving that music and helping it survive and thrive and grow in the world. So kind of just some housekeeping stuff real quick before we get started. This is our YouTube channel, our Taksim, Taqsim on YouTube. So please like and subscribe. I believe we're at almost about 2,000 subscribers. So if you can help us get to that 2,000 threshold, that would be great. Thank you in advance for that. So yeah, please check that out. We have a ton of great videos on there. We even have a chill Middle Eastern music mix and a whole bunch of other demo videos about different things that we do. So it's worth checking out. So kind of back to Taksim. So when we started this, our goal was to preserve and modernize Middle Eastern music, and that's a wide array and variety of different kinds of music, subtopics, and whether it's Arab music with many different cultures and regions within the Arab world, Greek music, Persian, Turkish, Armenian. I'm of Armenian descent, but interestingly enough, so when I grew up listening to music in the house or in our local community, it was a little bit of an extension of previous decades where immigrants had come to the United States and they were playing the music that they were familiar with from back home, wherever that may be in the world, in the Middle East. So I heard all different kinds of music. I heard, of course, Armenian, as I was Armenian, but substantial amount of other forms and styles as well. And if you were playing in nightclubs for, belly dance music, or whether it was more serious classical Middle Eastern music like salsemais and things of that nature. Um, Learning the oud for me was the opportunity to learn all these different styles and to try and master them, study them, be inspired by them. And it kind of really was a representation of the breadth and the diversity that we see in Middle Eastern music, and kind of that cross pollination and everything that goes on there. And that was really important for me. And I'm sure other musicians felt that way as well. We would have, violin, clarinet, kanun, oud, of course, derbeke, darbuka. I mean, everyone has different names for these percussion instruments. And um, and it kind of stuck with us over time. And I'm from the Philadelphia area. He still lives there, and I moved to Los Angeles about 10, 12 years ago for music reasons and some other reasons. And we kept in touch. And we said, okay, um, what's an interesting way that we can start to get this project up and off the ground. So we put our heads together. One of the things we did was starting an oud study course where we discuss all different kinds of scales. These just skills that you need to play the oud for a beginner and also for intermediate as well. Um, we do a lot of different types of coverage of that sort of thing. Some of the cool projects, real quick, that we're working on. We have our app, which is free. You can check it out on the App Store. And the app is for iPhone and iPad, and you can use it to play all kinds of different sounds, and it has a bunch of rhythms in there. So we kind of wish everyone would check that out. It's really done super well and been well received again. So that's something we're really excited about. So check that out. We're also working on a VST for synthesizer sounds that people can use in their productions and studios. So things of that nature are part of the Taksim project. We have a podcast. We have so many interesting guests that we've already featured from all over the world, different styles of music. We had Ahmad Mahori, a Persian kanun player. We had Aliyah Saikan, an American who's been living in the Middle East and Europe, playing the oud and composing. So we feature so many different cool things, and we want to share that with all of you. So that's, this is just a little update about all that. You can check out our podcast on Spotify, and even suggestions for our featured guests. Please, we're always taking recommendations. Let us know. I mentioned our instructional stuff. We're also excited. Pretty soon, we're going to have built up a little bit of a core faculty to teach different instruments, if people are interested. So that's something exciting we're working on as well. We have a blog that we share via email, covering all kinds of different topics. Our most recent one happened to do with something I'm going to talk about today a little bit, which is the differences in modal music across some different regions, and we're going to kind of focus a little bit on the two main schools of thought. This blog post talked about the mode Sika and Sega, which is just slightly different pronunciations, whether the Arab world or the Turkish world style of music is being discussed and applied on the instrument. And in the blog post, we talk about some of the different formulations of the makam, the mode, and what are the microtones that are used, and those differences that, as people play Middle Eastern music, the kinds of things that they want to think about for interpreting their instrument, playing the modes. And here's the thing: it's not like there's a super rigid form that you must play this and you must that. Of course, there's classical discipline, and that's respected, and that's very formal in certain examples. But it's also a situation where there's heavy improvisation, and that's something that when kind of people are coming over from Western music, they might tend to think about things in a more classical framework where things are more defined. The guidance is strict. The interpretation by the performer is either zeroed out or very minimal, and the composer is the main driving force artistically. But in a lot of Middle Eastern music, although of course there are compositions, there are formal pieces, classical music pieces, there is still a meaningful and considerable reliance on the performer to play the music as they interpret it. And that's a big piece of Middle Eastern music. And sometimes it comes up with my students. They might be looking for that, that rigid framework. And trying to explain that is, it can be an interesting dynamic because it's a shift in understanding how the music is supposed to work. Because a lot of people coming from the West are thinking in that, oh, I need the sheet music and I need this and I need that. And there's a little bit of that, of course, when you cross over, but it's something to think about, that improvisation. And so I'm going to look at some of our our comments here. This is the right link, finally. There you go. We got the right live. Hi, Khalifa. I like your pink flower. Thanks for stopping by. PAL, the app is awesome. Okay, there we go. I have 99% of the IAPs, just waiting for AUV3. Yeah, so AUV3, that's something that we're very, very excited about. So as far as the different products and sounds that Taksim offers, one of the big things we're working on right now for our commenter here, PAL, is the VST and also the AUV3, the digital audio workstation. So that's something that I'd say hopefully in the next month or two we should have available. It's something we continue to work on. We have a great team that works with us in terms of coding and development. So as we always do with our social media, we're always putting updates and status comments and things just to let people know of what we're working on. So please continue to follow up with us. We actually value that when people are engaging. So we know that what we're doing is actually meeting demand or needs that people have about what they're looking for. So that's great. So back to the modal music. So the one thing I wanted to kind of cover a little bit has to do with the differences between two main schools when it comes to modes. So kind of the two dominant styles of modal music in the Middle East are the Arab style and the Turkish style. And of course, both of these styles within themselves have an enormous amount of push and pull over the years and decades and centuries, or whatever you want to call it, historically. And they've incorporated different subcultures, musics, different influences, different regional styles, and that's all kind of been a part of the development of those different, the two big schools of thought. And that was one of the main things we were trying to discuss and include in our recent blog post. So here is a little bit of an elaboration on that. In that case, we talked about the Sega Sika example. So in that case, Sika, in the Arab sense, it starts on your E quarter flat, and that's a common theme that we have, the E quarter flat. So the E quarter flat is the beginning of the mode, and then it goes up E quarter flat, F, G, A, B quarter flat, C, D, E quarter flat. So if you're looking at this from a Western perspective, one might say, oh, it's kind of looking and acting and sounding like that E quarter flat, which is the first note, the first degree of that mode, is almost like the third degree of an implied major-like scale. So the C below the quarter flat, the E quarter flat. So you'd have E quarter flat descending from the beginning, you go down to D and then C. So there, that's something that came up on a recent Facebook Live that some of our friends, Vic Momjan, fantastic bass player, and Peter Denef, tremendous piano player, they discussed this as someone was asking it during that session as well. And we wrote a blog post on it to follow up, just to kind of put the answer out. But it's something I wanted to discuss a little bit too, because in the Arab style of music, there's a couple things that differentiate from the Turkish style. In the Arab style, you have more clearly defined quarter tones, literally exactly between the half steps. So that means you take a half step, a semitone, for example, B to B flat, descending, or B flat to B ascending, and you literally find the middle exact mathematical point frequency wise, and you pinpoint that, and there you have your quarter tone, which is, half of a half is a quarter. So back in the 30s in the Arab world, there was a decision made to formalize and standardize that system of microtonality. So microtonality is very broad. It's a very broad term. Microtonality means basically anything that is not fitting into the default Western equal temperament system. So equal temperament, as you know, is just my piano. I play my different keys. I go from half step to half step, and I can create my diatonic scales like minor and major. So the quarter tone system it can almost be considered in its standardized form to be equal temperament as well, in a way, because it's just a half of a half. It's still using the sense system that was created to standardize Western music, which, as some of our viewers probably know, the equal temperament system came up because just intonation, which is the real, true, correctly in tune system, is very hard to transpose on instruments as you move from key to key. The reason being, when you're perfectly in tune, and people who play the oud and the violin might notice this. I noticed this on my last record. So when I would play my notes on the oud, because it's fretless, I have the freedom and the latitude to find the perfectly in tune notes, and they don't always match up with what the tuner says. So when I hear it and feel it and I play it, and I would feel the minor third or the major third. For example, if we're in A, the minor third is C, the major third is C sharp. In equal temperament, the C, the minor third of A, is tuned flat. It feels and sounds flat. Or actually, I'm sorry, sharp. The major one is the flat one. Sorry, I reversed that. So you would hear a difference in what you were playing. So when I'd play an A major, A to C sharp, in equal temperament, it feels sharp. And it sounds sharp. Pay attention to that next time you do that. And when I would play it in my natural, just sitting there without looking at the tuner, and I'd find it, and it would feel good, and then I would look on the tuner, and it's telling me I'm flat. So, and for the minor, it's the opposite, where you would see the same thing happening in the opposite direction. So those kinds of things, just intonation, works when you don't have to switch keys, when you don't have to transpose, and it kind of pops up and bubbles to the surface when you're playing fretless instruments. So those are things you have to adjust to, because if, like for example, if I was going to add a guitar or a keyboard or any equal temperament, traditional equal temperament instruments, or if I'm using other musicians that I needed to write music for, they would need to come in and play they would need to come in and play the music, so we'd have to adjust. So what does that have to do with the modal system? Well, as I was explaining, the reason it's important is because the quarter tones are just the half of the half. So they are too, in an odd, ironic way, derived from equal temperament, in a way. And so since they're chopped in half, the real question becomes, where did those tones and those pitches come from? So if you do your research, you'll see, even in the Arab world, it's not always exactly quarter tone. Regionally, there are little differences and nuances, and I'm sure they had microtonality either up and down, sharp or flat. So there we go. Armen Sevag, shout out. Yes, dominating. Dominating modal music, right? So that quarter tone microtonality is one of the hallmarks of the Arab style. And when we were talking about in our blog post, Sika has those quarter tones. Now, if you're a Western musician and you're accompanying that, you'll have to figure out a way to figure out what you're going to do. So you would have to either look at, just a bass note a third below, where you can provide some reasonable semblance of a harmonic accompaniment to the melody, or you can kind of just play along as a monophonic music is in terms of this mode. You can literally just play those monophonic notes with the melody. Now, on the other side, and we'll come back to the Arab side, on the other side, on the Turkish side, depending on what you listen to, you will hear different things. It's a little more complex. The tuning system is based on commas. And now, what is a comma? A comma is having the distinction between um, moving away from quarter tones. Literally, we're not going to have that blunt force quarter tone in the middle. We're going to have finer gradations of microtonality within the half step or the whole step. So typically, you'd have 9 commas in a whole step, although it can be 8 depending on what mode you're talking about. And you'd have either 4 or 5 commas in a half step, again, depending on the mode. So those differences are not that big of a deal. I like to think of 8 or 9 roughly, and 4 or 5. So it's basically the whole step and the half step. It's kind of a similar concept of doubling and halving those increments, those small increments we use to define our music. So the commas, think of them as shaving down the notes with a fine, like sandpaper. And as you move down and decrease or increase your modes, decrease or increase your intervals, you get to certain notes of microtonality that you hear and see with greater diversity in terms of the player's versatility in the Turkish system. So if you listen to different Turkish recordings, you might get quarter tones, similar to the Arab sound, or you might get slightly flatter, slightly sharper than the quarter tone. It depends. For example, in Turkish classical music, it's common to notate. Let's look at Husseini. Husseini is a very common mode. Husseini is in some ways similar to a Western minor scale. Okay. Usually the root note would be E, but of course you can transpose as needed, but just traditionally it would be E. Let's use E as our example. So in E minor, you'd have E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, E. So that would be your standard E minor, observing our wholes and half steps that we have as a formula for a minor scale. Husseini, in the Turkish system, would take that F sharp and it would shave it down. And the F sharp classical notation would be 1 comma flat under the second degree, that F sharp. So it would be slightly flatter than an F sharp. Now, when it comes to how that's applied when people play it in the modern sense, you hear all kinds of variety. You hear some who might play, like for example, a lot of the music I would hear from Armenian players, they would probably, even though it was folk music, they would probably play it at that slightly flat second degree. So the whole tone between the 1 and the 2 would be a little bit smaller than what we hear in equal temperament. So pretty close, but not quite. And then when you move to other recordings with maybe more recordings from the Middle East themselves, from Turkish players, you start to get a little flatter. And you might get to the quarter tone with some, and you might kind of float a little bit. So the point is, the 1 comma notation, again, this is an example where the compositional direction, again, is interpreted meaningfully and considerably by the player to change it. So the players might move it and go down another 1 comma or 2 commas or 3 commas. I've heard players who play Husseini's second degree to a degree flatter than what's notated, so much that they almost get to a Kurdi interval, which is just a half step of E to F. They don't quite touch the F, but they float past the F sharp, either with a vibrato or their emphasis of how they're sounding that note. So you see that variety of, okay, the Husseini, there's like a flexibility or like a floating zone of that second degree, and different players fall in different spots within that zone. As far as the Arab version of Husseini, it would be a quarter tone. It would just simply be a quarter tone. You'd have the E, F sharp as the quarter, so in between F and F sharp, that literal middle point, and then G, A, B. I believe the C, the 6th degree, would also be a quarter tone between the C and the C sharp, depending on the player, and then the D and the E. But in the Turkish system, it's going to be a little more nuanced. It depends on the player. You'd have that kind of fluid F sharp, depending on the player, being a microtonality driven note in the second degree. And then this is a great opportunity to talk about another dynamic, which is modal music is not just, oh, I have the notes of the scale and I play them just up and down and that's it. Modal music, makam, has behaviors. It has affinities. There's gravity. Again, push and pull, that shows how the notes go up and down, depending on the direction of what's happening from the player. So, for example, if you're playing a taksim, which is kind of the key word to know, the key term for improvisation, you would observe these behaviors so the audience, the listener, will understand and have the audience will know that the player is interpreting the mode in a correct way. Of course, they have flexibility to improv themselves, but there are certain rules, tenets, guides, like a handbook, that you should follow when you play a taksim for different modes. So different modes have different behaviors. Husseini, the example we're using, has an ascending, descending behavior. That means it's one of the more complex modes where it has both behaviors. Other modes, for example, Vst, which is kind of like an analog for major with some microtonality, has more of an ascending behavior. So what does that mean? It means it starts from the beginning of the scale, starts from the beginning of the mode. You develop it there. And then once you develop that within the low register, you can kind of move into the extension of the mode, which is, if you're starting on D and you're talking about Vst, it would be D, E. The F sharp is, again, a quarter tone in the Arab system, or fluid microtonality in the Turkish system, but similar to major. So it's D, E, F sharp, asterisk, G, A, B, and then the C sharp has an asterisk as well. In the Turkish system, that C sharp can be fluid and move around. In the Arab system, that C sharp will be a quarter. So when we say ascending for Vst, we're talking about developing that mode in the beginning of the scale itself. D, move around there, develop with different cadences, D, E, F sharp, but then also going below that. You can go down, and I think, again, analogous to a major scale. You would maybe start with A, B, C sharp, D as a build-up, a pickup into the root, which is the D. So that ascending or descending behavior is a key factor when you're considering the mode and how you're playing it. It's not just, I played my scale and I'm done. That's really kind of missing the point when it comes to this music. And back to the Husseini example, with Husseini, I said it was a little bit more of an advanced mode, and it is, because it has an ascending and descending behavior. It's kind of a hybrid. And usually when you have an ascending, descending behavior, it suggests that the player will begin the mode developing at the dominant. So in Western terms, the dominant would be typically the fifth degree. In modal music, it can be other notes. It doesn't have to be the fifth. It usually is, but not always. So in Husseini, it happens to be the fifth degree. So if we were in E and you're playing Husseini, you would begin typically with a B, E, F sharp, asterisk, G, A, and then B. And then, so that would be the beginning of you introducing the mode. And if the audience or the listener hears that, they're able, and they're knowledgeable themselves, they're able to ascertain that Husseini is the mode that the player is playing. And then, of course, once you play it, you don't just start with that and end with that. What you would have to do is modulate, which means using other pivot points within the mode, other degrees, in order to launch into other subsections that would have the mode, that would have other modes played. So for example, in a taksim, if I were playing a Husseini taksim, I would start with the fifth degree. Again, we'll stick with our E origin example for Husseini. So B would be my starting point. And then I would develop that to a degree to keep it kind of in that boxy square sounding of the first degree and the fifth degree. And then I would also have cadences where I would work to the third degree, which is the G. It gives it almost like a little bit of a major modulation kind of sound. So I would kind of do those as either a half cadence or a suspended cadence. I would move, a common change would be switching to the fourth degree of Husseini, and you see this in a lot of the common modes like Husseini and Ushak. those like minor-ish sounding modes. You would move to the fourth degree, and at the fourth degree, which here was A, you would have different options. You can either use a Rast, which is kind of like that major sounding mode, or you can move to Hijaz, which is the quintessential Middle Eastern sounding mode to the west, very common in the Middle East, but it has that 1.5 step interval size. And those two modulations would be important to adding color and diversity to the mode. I see we have a question. Do you have any online resources that discuss the rules in the ascending descending cap? Okay, so that's a great question, Dr. Sevag. So what we do have currently is we have Oud instructional pre-recorded courses that discuss a lot of these things in detail, with demonstrations of makams, which are the modes, and demonstrations of taksim, which are the improvisational practice of interpreting the makams. So that's a pre-recorded course that's available. We also recently began doing customized, personalized lessons for students. We had a bunch of people reach out, so we started doing lessons. We have scales and rhythms section that is within the Taksim website. TAQS.im is the website. And that's available as well for anyone who's interested. And I think I mentioned earlier in this video, we have reached out and also received commitments from some super talented musicians to help us start a core faculty for a music school, an online music school. We're going to call it Modality. It's affiliated with Taksim. It's part of the Taksim family. It features some of the most accomplished masters that we have in Middle Eastern music from a variety of backgrounds, and they are going to be available for as a resource for anyone who would like lessons. So that's something that we're very excited about as well. It's in its beginning stages. We will have more updates as things develop, but we recently just spoke to 3 instructors this week, and they were very excited about offering that instruction. So that's something that we will keep everyone posted on as we move forward. I see another comment. The legend. Where are you from? Oh, okay. So I'm from the eastern part of the United States in Philadelphia. My mother is from Syria, from Aleppo, and my father was from the U.S. as well. So I grew up hearing different kinds of music. My partner Aram, his family is from Baghdad in Iraq. So we're Armenian, but we have ties to the Middle East in terms of the music we listen to. I would hear my mother speak Arabic. You asked, do you speak Arabic? I do not speak Arabic, but we love the music, and we have studied it for a long time. So welcome. We want to say welcome to everyone who's joined from all over the world. Taksim, one of the cool things that's been happening is we have a global audience. So it's become kind of this worldwide movement, which is very cool. So back to the makam discussion in context of Taksim. So Husseini, we talked a little bit about how you would modulate. You would start on the 5th degree. You can move to the 4th degree, and you can play Rast or Hijaz as your modulations when you move to the 4th degree. Another modulation that's common is going to the 7th degree, which is D off the E. So you go E, F sharp, asterisk, G, A, B, C, D. And D note you can modulate there typically with Rast as well. So that's something important to think about, all these little different pivot points of how you can modulate and provide improvisational artistic form in your Taksim. One thing I do want to discuss related to the ascending descending behaviors. So I want to give an example. If I was moving through the Husseini mode, when I go up and down, I play the notes differently. And here's an example. If I start from E and I move up and I ascend and I'm doing a scale run, da 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 da, and I'm moving up, I will do E, F sharp, asterisk, G, A, B, and then I will play the C sharp before I get to the D. Why do we do that? When you play, and as you kind of fiddle around and experiment a little bit with your instruments, you'll see there's a certain gravity. We can call it gravity. And when you are moving in a certain direction and your destination is a particular note in the mode, it will sound more fitting and suitable and natural to play the note closer to your final destination note. So in this example, the C sharp allows us to have closer proximity and closeness and affinity. It's kind of like if you think of electrons orbiting the protons, or however that works. I'm not a scientist, sorry. But you move through the scale, and your C sharp gets you to the D note, and it feels right. I would invite you to try that as well. So if you're going to that seventh degree when you're playing the taksim, and you get to that C sharp, when you get to that C sharp choice, try using the C sharp when you're ascending, moving up, and it will give it a stronger sense of fulfillment and resolution when you get to that final D note to do your modulation on D. And then similarly, when you're moving down and you're descending, it will make sense to go to the C. Or if you're playing in the Arab style as well, the C quarter note, that quarter tone is available to the player as well. And in the Turkish system, I've heard that used frequently as well. It's kind of an artistic choice, but the main differentiator is on your ascend, the notes in those soft spots, those fluid spots, like in Husseini, the second degree and the seventh degree, those are your flex zones where the note can change. So in Husseini, again, that would be the F sharp, where on the way up it'll be maybe a little sharper, closer to the G, or in terms of being closer to the G note, and on the way down it'll be maybe the quarter tone, or even a little flatter, like I've heard some players play it, where it's not quite at the F like a Kurdi, but almost. And then on the sixth degree, the C sharp and the C, there's also the C quarter tone in there as well as a flex note. So these are kind of broad concepts to think about, and we have videos available in our course where we demonstrate these kinds of things. And it's something that we teach too when we have our students in our lessons. So it's really important to think about, because if you're playing the modes correctly, and if you are and your goal is to become someone who can play taksim with credibility and authenticity, and to express your artistic ideas and that artistic merit, these are the things you have to do. You have to incorporate this into your playing through practice and study, and it'll help you become a better player. And oud is just an example. For example, I play the oud, but on other instruments, the same rules will apply. If you're playing violin, even I've heard some trumpet players, which is really cool, that they're able to play microtones on their instruments as well, quarter tones too specifically. So these are kind of broad strokes to talk about. The one other mode I want to talk about a little bit, we had mentioned Rast earlier, and we covered that. Rast is an ascending mode, and for example, if you're playing it off the D, let's say in the Arab system, it would be D, E, F sharp quarter tone, so right in the middle between the F and the F sharp, G, A, B, and then C sharp quarter tone. So right in between the C and the C sharp, it would be the quarter tone in the middle, and then D. So when you take the Rast mode and you play it with quarter tones, it gives it a very distinctive sound. Using quarter tones in what to a Western ear sounds major is very distinctive. Some of my friends for example, in the U.S., when they hear it, to them it sounds out of tune, but to me it sounds beautiful because I grew up hearing these modes. I grew up listening to it, so for me it's normal. It's something that's expected. Unfortunately, if you're trying to play Rast on a piano, unless you have an electronic piano with quarter tone abilities, you're not going to be able to play it. So Rast is kind of like the major mode, as we were saying before, major scale, but with its quarter tone abilities in the Arab scale version, it has a very different sound. And you cannot strum chords on a guitar to it. You cannot play piano chords or notes that match it unless you're tuned correctly. But for a oud or a violin or other instruments, Rast, other fretless instruments or wind instruments, they can play Rast. And it's a beautiful mode. I strongly encourage everyone to, there's all kinds of videos all over the place. We have our demonstration videos as well that show it. You should just listen to the different interpretations of Rast. So the Arab one is like that, with the quarter tones at the 3rd degree on the F sharp and the 7th degree on the C sharp. So it's almost like you took Husseini and you moved down one note to the D in Husseini, and then you play it from there. That's one way to think about it. In the Turkish version, Rast sounds much closer to a Western major scale. Not exactly the same, but the F sharp from the Arab system quarter becomes closer to F sharp in the West. And this is where it's kind of nice to close the loop on just intonation, which came up earlier. So just intonation, again, refresher. Just intonation is when you, as a musician, you're able to use the literal fundamental and harmonic, the harmonic frequency equivalents that are sounded when you make any pitch. All these frequencies that are so lightly, barely heard, that is just intonation. The real, like if you sing a sound like ah, there's a whole family of frequencies that are sounded when you make that pitch. We barely hear all the other ones, but they all exist within that sound that you made. That is what just intonation is. It's finding those correct frequencies and playing them themselves so they're perfectly in tune, perfectly in harmony with the naturally occurring frequencies. So in Rast, in the Turkish system, the F sharp is supposed to be 1 comma flat from F sharp. So if you were to play a D note as your tonic for Rast, within that D note that is sounded, and within all the frequencies that are in that spectrum that are also sounded there, the F sharp that is 1 comma flat is the naturally occurring major third. That is the right note, not the equal temperament F sharp, which is 2 sharp. And some musicians can tell the difference when they hear it. That, as we were saying earlier, that 3rd degree is sharp. But in Rast, in the Turkish version, it's supposed to be played 1 comma flat, notation-wise, and that is the true major third. So that's kind of a cool little fact. And then as you move through the scale, you have the D, E, the F sharp with the 1 comma flat, G, A, B. Typically, you just have a regular old C sharp, or that, again, 1 comma flat if you'd like, and then the D. So it's very close to the D major scale. However, modulation is part of how Rast is interpreted, like the other modes. So C, that C sharp zone becomes a flex spot, where some players might play a quarter tone between the C and the C sharp moving down. Some players, it's very common in Rast to move down to the C note, the C natural. So you do D. So if you're playing in it's an ascending mode, Rast. So you start with the root, you move up through the half, and you develop the 2nd degree and the 3rd degree with suspended cadences. And then once you make your way up to the octave, when you descend down to do your final cadence and final resolution, it's very common to forego the C sharp and make it a C. So that's an interesting point, and that kind of holds in both systems from what I've heard in Rast. So that's an interesting point on Rast. For Hijaz, what I'd like to do is we're going to keep Hijaz for another discussion. We're already coming up at about almost 45 minutes, so I want to thank everyone who joined us today. We're going to make a habit of doing these more often. I think it's a great way for people to engage. It's a great way to share some of the things we're doing with Taksim, to discuss modal music, kind of the technical side a little bit, but I know some players love this stuff and want to discuss it or want to hear about it. So I will leave you with this, my friends from all over the world. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is just Taksim, Taqsim. We have all kinds of interesting videos that you can benefit from and learn from and enrich your musical experience from. So please like and subscribe. Also on social media, we are Taksim Music, Taqsim Music, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We also have a Facebook group, our Facebook Taksim Middle Eastern community, which is growing. I think it's over 5,000 people. So please, take some time and check out all the wonderful videos and all kinds of interesting tidbits that people put up over there as well. It's a great networking opportunity and to find people who are of similar interest in Middle Eastern music. Our website is taqs.im, so it's Taksim spelled out. And yeah, I wish everyone a wonderful week. We will be putting out more videos as well. We will be keeping you updated with all the great new projects we're working on. And we hope to see you again soon. Okay, take care.